tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness.
Hello, good evening to another episode of the Annoying Tech Truth podcast. We have a guest today, and our guest is Mr. Paul Gow. Someone I've met on LinkedIn, so one of my connections in there, and we are going to be talking about digital independence. It's a very interesting subject, and this is what caught my eye when I was looking at what Paul was talking about on LinkedIn. He is talking about his own way of doing things. He's very big into digital independence. So we have a few interesting topics to talk about. But I guess I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, so my name is Paul. I'm a computer scientist. I don't think I really need much of an introduction. So let's just, maybe before we get started, we should probably talk about what digital independence actually is. Because when I drop this phrase onto people, suddenly their lights go off in their mind. But it's almost like they don't really know why lights go off in their mind. It's one of these catchphrases that sounds like, oh, that sounds interesting. So, how I define digital independence basically is the ability for you to be the master of your own data, your own software, your own digital life, more or less. And way back in the 90s, we had digital independence and people didn't realize it. And then probably around the turn of the millennium, we lost our digital independence and people also didn't realize. So the reason why I say that we had digital independence in the 90s is because for the people who were involved in the tech space back then, the center of computation was largely on the user's device. So back then it was all about shareware and there wasn't really, there was an internet and early BBSs and stuff like this. But,
I remember those days. Yes. No. You did a search on the internet, you'd get a couple of results. There was no Google. We used to use something like Yahoo search or Alta Vista search engine. I mean, who remembers Alta Vista? Seriously. So that was Google was just appearing at that point on the scene, and it was seen as this small company fighting the big behemoth of Yahoo, was owning everything at that point.
Yeah. But the reality is that most of the software, like if you were a graphics person, you would use Photoshop on your computer.
Yes.
If you're all your games would be locally on Microsoft Word. All your documents would be on your machine.
Yeah.
All your video editing would be on. Everything was on your machine.
Your software. All the applications you were writing on your machine. Everything. Nothing. No cloud.
Yeah. So you were independent, and like nobody could really there wasn't this issue where we just had a power outage here and where I am about an hour ago, and the internet went off for about 2 minutes, and it's just like. These days, if the internet goes out, it's like you're basically useless.
Yeah, you're done.
You can't even function. You can't do anything, right?
Yep.
And now you could argue against this and say like, oh yeah, well the software just was less powerful. But I would push back on that and say that this need, why we moved from why we moved the locality of computation from the user's device to the cloud. Didn't have anything to do with technical. I should say didn't have anything to do. It wasn't driven by this need to make software allegedly more powerful because like when the software's in the cloud it can do X, Y, and Z. Because the thing is that you can still do all the collaborative stuff. The whole digital independence movement is not necessarily about trying to disband the whole notion of the internet. It's trying to put the internet in its rightful place.
Yes.
And keep the vast majority of computation on your device where it belongs, and then use the internet for the things that you can only use the internet for. Right?
Yeah. So like exchange a message maybe or something.
I'll let you jump in and kind of maybe.
So for me, it's quite a big subject. I've been trying to move away from a number of things that I've been using in the past. Everything that is basically tracking us or using our data, stealing our data, and you know what I'm talking about, all those big companies. So when I say I've been moving away, I'm talking about I stopped using Chrome. For example, I use Brave these days, which it's a Chromium engine, but it's got a lot of protection in it already, ad blocks and stuff like that, because I don't function without those. So if a website comes and says, "Hey, you have an ad block, so you can't see this," and I'm saying, "Okay, then I'm not going to look at it." Yeah. I'm trying to move away. So you're the one who told me about Signal, this application that we used to talk to each other, which again, untracked, doesn't belong to big company. So it looks like a replacement for WhatsApp for me. And I think I'm starting to see a value in a movement away from the big tech companies who simply want too much from us and demand too much. PayPal is another example. I had an account, closed it when we had that debacle with a £2,500 fine. I don't know if you're aware of that one. But that was quite big a couple of months ago, I think it was.
Who got fined? You got fined?
No, I didn't. No, if you don't know, PayPal added something to their terms and conditions.
That thing. Yeah.
Yes. And I said, you know what? No, I'm not playing this game. So I closed my account straight away. And yes, it's making life uncomfortable. But I always advocate, you know what? We can actually deal with being uncomfortable for a bit, for a bigger purpose. And this is one of them. So your name caught my attention because you were talking about these things that are quite important to me as well. And I know you're working on something as well, which I'm keeping an eye on because I want to see where this is going. And we're going to talk a bit later, hopefully, about your Yes protocol and how that's going, if you don't mind, because that's quite a big subject as well. Yeah. So what do you think? Should we speak a little bit about Yes?
Yeah, sure, if you want. Excuse me. So the purpose of the Yes protocol is basically, if anybody's just familiar with RSS, Yes is basically trying to bring RSS back to life. So RSS itself, maybe I should talk about RSS a little bit. Mm-hmm. RSS was an interesting protocol that had some popularity back around 2000s-ish time frame. And why it was interesting was because it allowed journalists to be able to syndicate their content directly to their audience members. And you could do it without any middleman at all, nothing. So it would just work just by basic traditional old school web hosting.
Yeah.
So if you had just some web space anywhere on the internet, you could put your content, your RSS formatted content up on your web space, and then all your audience members would have an RSS reader app that they would download, and then that RSS reader would be the entity that would be responsible for aggregating the content from all the different journalists that the users subscribe to. So really, it's very much the same as what social media does. Except it ties into this notion of digital independence, where like the aggregation function right now is being outsourced to Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whoever it is, right?
Yeah.
But the RSS model proves that responsibility doesn't need to be outsourced to a third party.
Correct.
Your device is perfectly capable of handling that function. So if the device is perfectly capable of handling that function, then, what's the benefit of outsourcing it? And it's
exactly.
Like, well, the benefit is to the platform vendors for, reasons that I will leave to people's imagination, right? So the idea of the Yes protocol is to say, look, RSS was a big mess, and we probably don't need to go into the weeds of why RSS had a whole bunch of problems with it, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea of the Yes protocol is to say, okay, well, RSS was a great concept about how the devices, the user's device is the thing that handles the aggregation responsibility, right? And it's like that part of it is good. Everything else is a mess. So it's okay. Well, let's create this new protocol that doesn't have all the problems with RSS, but allows us to do things like modern social media, but in a digitally independent fashion, right? So that if you want to create some kind of like, I mean, it doesn't really have anything to do with any specific way of forming the social media, but if you want to do a Twitter type thing, or you want to do a TikTok type style, excuse me, TikTok style short video stream, all that stuff is possible for like people can make software that operates on top of the YES protocol that allows those types of social content sharing experiences to operate.
Yeah, that's the bit that caught my eye actually, and this is why it's actually so important. You provide a way of doing it, and then it's our job to start using it, and hopefully this leads us into the next generation of social media platforms. I mean, we're seeing today quite a lot how controlled we are when it comes to social media. There are certain things you can talk about, other things you can't talk about, and you are at the mercy of the provider, right? And whoever that may be, if it's Google or Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. But if we start to own our content, and if we start to build our own sources of content, it sounds quite attractive to me. And this is why I wanted to keep an eye on what you're doing and see where this is going. It may not succeed, but I'm happy to see that someone is at least trying to do something. You know, we're not just laying down, waiting to die because there's nothing we can do. And I appreciate that. So I want to thank you for that on behalf of myself and hopefully everybody else.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, I think that the success of this thing is actually, I mean, the David versus Goliath thing, I don't think is quite, it's not an impossible task, I guess is what I'll say, because there's a lot of places where the social platforms are intentionally weak. So, for example, I mean, as we all know, when you use social media, you're not the customer, you're the product,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And because of that, they don't care about the users at all. The users are basically their attention extraction cattle, right? And they're not there to try to make you more profitable or to make you, necessarily grow your audience. I mean, they don't really care. They're there to get you to watch ads. That's it.
Yes.
And everything else is a distraction. I mean, yeah, if they got to improve the user experience to do that, then, maybe they do that. Or maybe if they, they need to make it so that you can grow your audience, and they'll do that. But it's almost like they almost do it begrudgingly type thing, right? Because it's like at the end of the game, or at the end of the day, it's all about trying to sell people ads, right? So they end up doing a whole bunch of silly things that are extremely aggravating to users. So simple little examples, like on Instagram, in the description of the photo there, when you write the text description, you can't put a link there. And of course, they could add this in about 19 seconds.
Yeah.
Be able to put a link there.
Yeah.
But it would make the app 1,000 times more useful to especially creators that are trying to drive traffic to their audience. But you just can't do that. Well, for obvious reasons, right? Because they want to, hold everybody on the platform as much as possible. Why they want to do that? Well, because the time on site is their main success metric, because then that drives their ad revenue, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just one silly little example. And the whole entire thing is like all these platforms all function like that, where they're all these walled gardens that are just doing all these, the reason why they're pushing all this degenerative content is to get people addicted to the platform, because they want to get people addicted to the platform, because that drives up their criteria, or their success criteria, right?
Yes.
Which is, so you say, okay, well, we're actually competing with like entities here that are like, to use a Star Wars analogy here, I mean, there are thermal exhaust ports with, where you can like drive the X-wing across and like, drop the torpedo down there and like pull, like there are weaknesses in the Death Star here, right? They're not like these impenetrable, all powerful entities that are physically impossible to take down. It's like you have to get them where they're weak. And I think users are going to appreciate that, because, when you say to people, look, here's a platform, well, it's not a platform, but here's a social media distribution tool. And the ball's totally in your court. You can do basically whatever you want with it. Obviously with some, sensible limitations and whatnot. And there's no centralized platform here that's trying to, manipulate this algorithm, manipulate that algorithm, because it's almost like you have the relationship between the creators and the platform is like this tug of war where, the platform is there to try to drive their own monetization. Their platform has its own monetization interest, and that's really what it cares about. Whereas when you drop out this platform, it's like suddenly the monetization interests are now completely with the creators, right? Which that's a much stronger appeal, I think, to the creators because, well, you can, potentially be a lot more profitable on this platform than you would with the other ones, right?
Yeah, I think so. But here's a question. So you've done quite a bit of work on this protocol, right? Would you describe it as being ready to go?
Well, I mean, the way that these protocols tend to work is, there's a full specification with.
Okay, there's a reason I ask this. So there's a reason. So
the thing is that you can spec out a protocol, right? But until there's actually a working implementation,
exactly,
that has been battle tested and has run into all the problems, then at that point you have to go back and say, okay, so this idea that we had that doesn't work. It's got to work like this now, right? Because for whatever reason that was completely unknowable. But I mean, it's pretty. I mean, if anybody who's looked at the Yes protocol, if you've looked at the Yes protocol, it's basically just HTML, and that's totally by design. I'm trying to invent as little as possible. This is one of the places where RSS made a lot of mistakes. They tried to invent a new presentation layer.
Yeah.
So they said, oh, we've got these heading things here, and we got these paragraph things here, and they're having all this internal political fighting about, oh, we should have bullet lists, so we shouldn't have bullet lists. It's like, okay, like you got Facebook that's like this hungry lion in your kitchen right now, and if you don't, get your ass moving, this thing is going to eat you, right? But meanwhile, the RSS people were quibbling about whether or not, the protocol should allow bulleted lists or not. And then the thing, I mean, it wasn't just that; it was a million other things too, right? And then they ended up getting killed, right? So this is why I'm saying it's just like, let's just make this thing as minimal as you can possibly make it. So it's basically HTML and CSS, and there's no JavaScript. The reason there's no JavaScript is because it makes it a lot easier to do syndication like that, gets rid of all these security issues. And with that, it's like, the idea is to make the thing as low risk as possible, right? So you're not inventing. Anyway, so you're going to say something there.
So yes, there's a reason I was asking that question, because let's face it, most people are lazy. And my question to you is, do you plan to build anything, even like a small demo app, just showing how this works, let's say, as a proof of concept or what? I'm not asking you to build a platform by yourself, but do you plan to do anything like that?
Absolutely. And I've been a year. So to give you some backstory on how this development worked, I mean, it didn't really start with a protocol that, I mean, you understand, like I think people who haven't done experimental development and scientific research don't really understand how these things operate. So for anybody who's listening who doesn't know how this stuff works, it's like at the very, very beginning of an invention, it's like you have this amorphous blob of just question marks.
Yeah.
And you don't really, you kind of know that there's something to do with the protocol, I think, somewhere. And there's maybe something, I think there probably has to be some kind of app, I think, maybe somewhere. And you just end up just specking things out and then building a little bit of stuff.
Yeah.
And then into the building, you realize that, well, this doesn't work. So you got to kind of go back. So it's this constant just like talking to the customers, working on the specification, trying to build an app. It's this constant, like, a lot of confusion, right? So when I started, I knew that there was going to have to be something to do with some kind of new protocol, but I just thought that at some point the protocol could eventually be extracted out from the app that I was building. And so I guess the answer to that question is yes. I started actually building an app and then sort of extracted the protocol out of it. But now there's been drift between the actual app and the protocol. They kind of went like this because of this is just what happens, right? So So now I'm going back and trying. So now that the protocol that I think is relatively strong, I'm going back now to the app and trying to reformat the thing so that it's more compliant with the protocol.
That sounds great. Because what I'm going to do on this video, I want to make everyone's life as easy as possible. So have a link to the Yes specification, any other documentation that you feel you're comfortable sharing or you want people to see. Any other links that you've got, if you've got something, if you've got the app somewhere, maybe a link to that, I don't know, whatever you've got, I just want to make it as easy as possible for everyone to have a look at this thing and maybe try it out. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, at this point, it still is a little bit early. Like I have an app called Direct, which is the app that I built kind of before the protocol was properly finalized. And yeah, that app kind of works right now, but it's a bit iffy. But I'm hopefully in I don't know, a couple of weeks maybe, I'll have something put together that allows you to rapidly create content that is conformant to the Yes protocol.
Oh, that sounds really good, actually.
Yeah, and then after that, then you need to get the Reader app going too, right? Which, I mean, I have all these pieces because, like I said, I've been a year into this development, so yeah, I've kind of got all the pieces that are kind of all scattered all over the place. So it's just a matter of like ripping this out and putting these two things together and sort of cleaning the whole thing up, right? So
yeah, no, I appreciate that because I don't think enough of us are doing something. We're moaning about it, we're talking about it, but we're not actually doing much. And if I could help get a few people to have a look at it, I think that would be really, really good. I'm going to ask you a question now, which is a question that you asked yourself, really. But do you see this as a precondition to getting someone to wake up?
do I see which?
So we exchanged some ideas and topics that we wanted to talk about before this episode, obviously. One of them, we were talking about the science of red pilling, and that was your idea, basically. And one of the questions that you were asking there, what are the necessary preconditions to getting a person to wake up? And by wake up, you know what I mean, being clear about what's happening around them.
Yeah.
So is this what you're doing now?
Put me on the spot here.
Big question.
Well, it's almost like getting people to clue in, I think is it's a touchy subject, right?
Yes.
And it is you're walking on your eggshells, obviously,
Yes.
all the time.
Yep.
And where do I want to go with this? Obviously, I think the main thing that can be done, I think, is access to information, more or less.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you could make the case, and well, with unlimited information, some of these people are just so confined into their way of thinking that no amount of information is going to convince them otherwise.
Yeah.
And that argument certainly has some weight
merit
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely some merit there, but I mean, I'm kind of like a person who's interested in behavioral psychology and stuff. I like to understand. Like, I've seen a lot of people that have done a lot of these videos that how they had their kind of like awakening video about what happened, and they walked the whole steps of what happened, and I found that extremely interesting. To just try to listen, I must listen to hundreds of these videos, and just like every single one, I'm just, just totally enamored by these stories, and there's a lot of themes here, and I mean, I don't know if this is kind of like a not really anything to do with the Yes protocol, I guess, but there's obviously certain conditions that need to be set up just right, and there's probably certain temperament within the individual that needs to be aligned, I think, in order for this so-called red pilling effect to take hold.
I think you're right. Yes.
But the thing is that it's a very, very interesting phenomenon, and I think that it's a topic that I think warrants like almost academic study. because it's, like I said, it's very, very interesting, and it probably has something to do with agreeableness, meaning that people who are super high in agreeableness tend to, I think, be less willing to stray from the pack. Obviously, I mean that doesn't need any explanation.
Yep.
So it's like, all right, well, there's probably a temperamental thing there, but maybe there's other ways so you can get people to clue in that who are agreeable, but you tap into other attributes that agreeable people tend to have in order to sort of drive this kind of red pilling effect. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a behavioral psychologist. I'm just a person that kind of reads things on the internet about this stuff, right? But it just seems to me like a very, very interesting topic that is, because there's these recurring patterns with a lot of these things. It's like you would think that there's some error, some discipline there that could be studied. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a great subject, and I think you are right. It all starts with access to information. So our sources of information these days are quite, how do I put this nicely? Very careful what they're sharing, right? Certain things are shared, other things are not. Now, if we manage to build something on top of Yes, for example, that we've been talking about so far, which allows us to aggregate the sources of information that we want to actually listen to, then that can change things quite a lot, right? You can filter through all the misinformation that's happening. So that's why I'm interested, because if I can do that, then I don't have to always look at, okay, where this is coming from, who said that, can I trust this? Is it coming from a government? Is it coming from a big tech company? In which case, no, I don't trust it. But where's it coming from? So it's a fascinating subject, I think. I don't have a good answer to that one, but we've got to do something. That's what I know. The information is what rules the world these days, and you can see that from everything, from Ukraine to everything else. You never know if some piece of information is true or not. And that bothers me, because the decisions that we make rely on the sources of information that we have. You can't make informed decisions based on lies, because if you do, then they are the wrong decisions. And you can see that all the time. And I also like what you said, that we need some sort of scientific approach to this, because it feels to me right now, it looks to me that everything is based on feelings, We feel that person is right. We feel the situation should be this way. But there's no data behind any of that. Do you know what I mean? And I don't like that. I want to see some data. I want to see, like, take COVID, for example, because I've been talking about that before. I want to see data. What I don't want to see is a government telling me that the risks outweigh the benefits outweigh the risks. I don't want to hear that. No, I want to see the bloody data. Do you know what I mean? Then I'll make my own decisions about the benefits and the risks. So that's what I'm talking about. It was a loaded question, basically, but but you are the one who challenged me, and you said, "Hey, try to make me look in a certain way." So I've done that.
There you go. Right?
Yeah, but it's a fascinating subject. It really is. So now let's see. We've been talking about this for quite a while now. I think we are up to about 28 minutes now. Wow, 28 minutes that flew very, very quickly. Do we have time for one more question, do you think?
Sure.
What do you think is the role of a moderator in today's social media? Another loaded question.
How do I do this without going to jail? I don't really like this question, to be honest, because I think there's so many different areas. What's the definition of a moderator in this case?
Someone who looks at content and decides, no, you shouldn't be talking about that. I'm going to ban you, or I'm going to silence you for a while.
Sure, but I think I mean, there's a lot of different content. I mean, the definition of that's the function of a moderator, right?
Yes.
But the definition of a moderator, I mean, in a sense, like what does a moderator look like? Are we talking about a forum? Are we talking about like Cognizant, which is a third party moderation or media moderation contractor is employed by LinkedIn and Facebook and whatnot?
Yes, one of those.
It's like So with the Yes protocol, the way I'm starting with this is I'm starting. This is probably going to ruffle some feathers, and people are probably going to tell me that this is a terrible idea, and maybe this is true. But when it first starts, there's going to be no commenting at all.
Yes.
It's just content. And if that is a problem for people, then we can start looking at different ways to do commenting. I have my doubts as to whether or not commenting on other people's content is necessary. I could be wrong about that. I could be extremely wrong about that. But I would like to first explore the notion that potentially that's actually not necessary. And it's only really there to, quote, drive engagement of the platforms and, all the rest of the stuff that entails, right? Now, the thing is that if that isn't necessary, that changes things dramatically. Because the commenting, I think, is a major thing that keeps these app stores, the whole app store app relationship, okay, is large, and the whole contention about should the app be banned, should the app not be banned, is largely predicated on the commenting,
yes,
and the moderation, right?
Yeah.
But if you sidestep that whole thing entirely, then suddenly you've got a very different landscape.
Yeah.
And it's unknown to me where that leads, but I think it at least makes sense to start by saying no commenting is just going to be content. And maybe the next step after that is direct messaging, because it's direct messaging, it's still not public, right?
Yep.
And then maybe after that, then it's direct messaging, but then the content creator can then approve the content and put it out publicly. In which case, it's still commenting, but then we've moved the moderation responsibility to the creator.
Yeah.
Which maybe that's where it belongs. Now you could say, well, that's just dumping a lot of responsibility on top of them, which could also then result in different. When somebody posts some terrible idea on whatever platform, out on the internet, and suddenly they're going to get all the comments. They're going to say, "Oh, that's a fantastic idea," right? Because those are the only ones that were approved, right?
Yeah. So
there's that issue. I guess my answer to this question is, it's what to do about moderation is a hot topic right now, and a lot of people are talking about it.
Yeah.
And I think the first order of business is to question the premise of the question itself, and to say, well, it's not entirely obvious to me right now that moderation is even something that's necessary. It might be. Maybe I'm an idiot. But right now, let's just first determine if that's necessary or not. And if it isn't, well, then we can basically just sidestep this whole thing, and we don't even have to solve this problem, right?
Yep.
I think it was Elon Musk that said the number one problem that engineers make is solving problems that don't actually need to be solved.
Correct.
Right? So it's if we can somehow just not solve this one, that's the best way to do it, right?
Yeah, it's a lot less work that we don't have to do. I like that. I absolutely like that. And I like your style, because you seem to be very focused on what you think it's important, rather than getting sidetracked with all kinds of features that may or may not be necessary at some point in the future. And I like that, because that shows to me laser-like focus on something. And I think that's probably the best way to start this endeavor. I
think it probably also shows that I've been bitten in the ass about 150,000 times.
Yep. Yeah. but that's how we learn, right? So you learn to do that. Awesome. So you see, it wasn't too bad. It was another loaded question, but it kind of led us to a good place, I think. So I'm going to make sure I put all the information that you give me on about Yes in the description of this video. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else you'd like to mention?
I think I got to just pull the plug right now. I'm starting to. I mean, I for the people that don't know, I'm pretty sick right now. So
that's fine. I appreciate your time.
I'm trying to hang on here.
Yeah, we've been going on for quite a while. So, Paul, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate you, and hope we can do this again in the future. Thank you, man.
All right.
Cheers.
Sounds good.
Bye.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.